Donald Trump, with his anti-DEI orders, has us once again fighting over the crumbs. Chris Graham, Augusta Free Press. So DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, is, quote, immoral per Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump, a white man born in the millions, whose father bought him an Ivy League degree and then gave him a $400 million head start in the business world, thinks diversity, equity, and inclusion is immoral. Interesting word choice there, coming from a guy with 34 felony fraud convictions, hundreds of millions of dollars in judgments for fraud and defamation. The lack of self awareness from Donald Trump here, stunning. We have this guy who was born on third base and thinks it was because he hit a triple, claiming he wants everyone else to have to compete in a thumb on the scale meritocracy that benefits the already advantaged, like him. Here's a quote from his press secretary, Caroline Levitt. President Trump campaigned on ending the scourge of DEI from our federal government and returning America to a merit-based society where people are hired based on their skills, not for the color of their skin. This is another win for Americans of all races, religions, and creeds. Promises made, promises kept. Bless her heart. She was speaking there in defense of the executive order signed by Trump on DEI and diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility DEIA mandates, policies, programs, preferences, and activities in the federal government under whatever name they appear. Uh, his executive order terminating DEI, DEIA. I love the language there in this statement from our taxpayer funded PR flunky about people are hired based on their skills, not the color of their skin. That's just adorable coming from somebody working for Donald Trump, who pretends to be a self-made man, though his only skill is being born into wealth. Now, a follow-up executive order from Trump revoked a directive dating back to Lyndon B. Johnson. And you have to think about your history books. Most of you watching this, Lyndon B. Johnson, the president from 1963 to 1969, he had an executive order on the books that required government contractors to adopt non-discriminatory practices in hiring and employment. So, if you're wondering what's really motivating Trump here, yeah, he's back in the White House because he convinced white people that blacks, Latinos, and LGBTQs are getting all the good jobs because of DEI, when in reality, all we've been trying to do as a society for the past 60 years is give everybody a fair shot at good paying jobs. Now, let's be real here. Trump's history tells us he doesn't care if anybody gets a good paying job as long as he's taken care of. The family wealth that he was born into was the result of the paterfamilias, Fred Trump, skimming money from federal government affordable housing projects meant to benefit GIs returning from World War II, and then he built on his ill-gotten profit margins by stiffing his employees at every opportunity. Now, credit to Donald Trump, he learned at the feet of the master, and he's been stiffing the people who did the work on the few buildings he's actually been able to see to completion for decades. Pro tip, that's how you cook the books to get out from under multiple bankruptcies. What he's really doing here with these executive orders is giving preference with our tax dollars to his cronies so they can fleece the federal treasury the way his father did to make his mint. Now, this hurts us, not helps us. I get it that it does me no good to call foul on this because it is what it is. This is the law of the land for the next 4 years. Just need you to know this is setting all of us back, not just the black folks, the Latinos, the Asians, the women, the LGBTQs, who can now again be legally discriminated against in terms of hiring and the awards of federal contracts. We're all better off if we're all better off, if we're all able to be the best versions of who we can be. This is something that has motivated my entire life as a journalist. Now, I'm a white male, but I'm also the product of a hardscrabble background. I was born to teen parents, grew up in a rural trailer park in a single parent household on food stamps and free school lunches. Say all you want that I got out on merit, but I had to work a million times harder than the kids who grew up in middle class and upper middle class backgrounds in Northern Virginia just to get the same opportunities they had. And a lot of the kids that I grew up with who could and should be doing more with their lives are less than they should be just because the obstacles were too high. Because of what I've experienced, I have a tiny bit of insight into how hard it is to have the deck stacked against you, especially if you're an ethnic or racial minority, or if your obstacles are being a woman in a society that doesn't view women as equals, or an LGBTQ in a world that would rather you don't even exist. If all of us, if rural whites, if blacks, Latinos, and Asians, if women and LGBTQs can be the best version of us that we can be, that makes America better, makes us all richer, both in terms of money and every way else you can be. Now, I'm obscuring what the real motivation here is for Trump. What Donald Trump is selling about DEI being, quote, immoral is a throwback to the racial and gender politics of the Old South, where the political elites exploited rural whites by making them believe that their enemy was blacks who wanted to come take their jobs, and not the elites themselves who wanted to keep both poor whites and blacks in a box so they could exploit them as cheap labor. Of course, blacks weren't allowed to vote, so the whole strategy was let's get the rural whites to vote for us so that we can keep them in a box. We already got the black folks in a box with Jim Crow, right? There's a straight line here from slavery to Jim Crow to Richard Nixon's Southern strategy to the Reagan Democrats all the way to today's MAGA. It's the same thing. DEI is, well, it's past tense for now, a small concession to trying to address the massive wealth and income inequality that the infamous Reagan tax cuts wrought. Fact. The top 1% now hold more than 30% of the wealth in this country. The bottom 50% hold 2.6%. So 1% of the people in this country hold 30% of the wealth. 50% hold 2.6%. DEI is just crumbs. And Trump, by making what ails us as a country being about DEI, he has us fighting over the crumbs while the wealthy elites grab more and more from the bounty.